Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 66 of Social Harmony. Today, I'm joined by Matt Melvin. He is the author of Bullied Behind Bars. A gay Christian Trump supporter goes to prison. And as you can imagine, from a title like that, there is a lot that's gone on in Matt's life. He has an incredibly powerful story about his own life and upbringing, the challenges that he's faced, the choices that he made that put him in situations that we would all rather not be in, what he went through behind bars, and ultimately finding that self affection, that self love, and drawing on faith to reintegrate him into society as a stronger person, despite the experiences that he went through while in prison and beyond. So, yeah, with that in mind, please give it a listen. I hope you enjoy. I hope you take the same good messages of hope that I did. But either way, I hope you find it very, very interesting. Thank you very much for listening. Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of Social Harmony. Today I'm joined by Matt Melvin, who is the author of Bullied Behind Bars, a gay Christian Trump supporter goes to prison. Well, with that title there, Matt, can I ask you, tell my audience a little bit about yourself. Who are you?
My name is Matt Melvin. I was born in Tingsboro, Massachusetts. I was bullied in childhood. My neighbor to the left of us, Brian, actually bullied me. But then behind us was my best friend, Tim, and we were best friends because he had a in-ground pool. And I love swimming. Swimming is my favorite sport. So I've always had
Wow.
a passion for swimming.
Mm-hmm.
In 1988, my parents made the unfortunate decision to relocate our entire family up into Vermont. My father actually got a job at Franklin County Home Health. And it was the worst decision they could have made because Vermont is very isolating. It's very hard to make friends. And I was still
Okay.
bullied. Even though they had changed geography, I was still bullied. And I think part of that is because I'm
Wow.
autistic and I'm on the Aspergers spectrum, so I come to
Mm-hmm.
the world a little bit differently. But I believe my
Yeah.
gifts are I'm a gift. What I bring to the world is a gift, and it's not a
Yeah.
liability, as some people might see.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, in the title of your book, there is a lot to unpack. So can I ask? Yeah, you talk about your childhood, and you just mentioned being, on the Asperger's spectrum, etc. But I believe that didn't come up until adulthood. Is that correct?
Well, I was diagnosed when I was 20,
Righty.
but my
Okay.
parents always thought there was a reason why I had trouble fitting in, why I
Yeah.
had trouble making friends.
Mm.
The way I learned was different than other children did.
Mm. Yeah. So, well, I mean, what what did a lot of your childhood look like? I mean, you've touched on being bullied, but I suppose it must have impacted your growth and development. Feeling quite ostracized. Would that be a fair description?
I felt very ostracized throughout most of my
Hmm.
life. Yes.
Yeah. Wow. So that's going to impact how you relate to people as well. I mean, I suppose, like you said, being on one end of an Asperger's spectrum would impact how you would relate to people, but then never having the practice. I mean, did you have did you have friends at all growing up, or were you totally isolated?
No, I had a good one. My best friend lived behind us when I was in
Mm.
Tingsboro.
Hmm.
But once my parents made the decision to move up into Vermont, I was all alone. I also
Yeah.
had a woman named Barbara, who I talk about in my book
Mm.
extensively,
Hmm.
who was a type of mother to me. I mean,
Mm.
she would watch my brother and I while my parents worked. So I
Mm.
had become like her third son in a
Mm.
way. And
Mm.
she, now that I'm removed out of Massachusetts, she's no longer really close and able
Mm.
to take care of us when my
Mm.
parents are working.
Okay. All right. Well, that does sound like well, an incredibly lonely existence. And so, I mean, how did you cope? How did you self-soothe, as it were? Clearly going through a lot and what have you, with nobody to turn to. How did you form your own resilience?
Well, at that point, I had a very negative feeling about myself.
Hmm. Okay.
And it's not until I started doing men's work in 2022 that I have accepted who I am and started to love myself. Because if you don't love yourself, you can't love another person.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, well, you say you had a negative view on yourself. I mean, what did that look like? How did that present?
I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. Something's
Mm.
wrong with me.
Mm. Yeah, and did this translate to like maladaptive behaviors? Were you getting into fights? Were you causing problems with us, or were you very very closed off yourself?
Well, I was getting in confrontations with school teachers. That, and then I was speeding, and then that's where the criminal the my criminal activity accelerated from
Mm.
speeding to driving off at gas stations without paying, walking out of restaurants without paying, to 2004, where I was working at a car dealership and they didn't pay me my commissions, so I took it upon myself to try to sell one of their cars. Of
Mm.
course, the shadow of being autistic and on the Asperger's spectrum is that impulsivity. So no
Yeah.
amount of medication, no amount of therapy is ever going to resolve that issue. I just
Mm.
choose to think about consequences, because every decision I make has both positive and negative consequences.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, is that something that, as you've grown, has become easier to manage?
Yes, because I have better outlets. I know who I
Mm.
am. I've done work on myself. I've
Mm.
found and made some really good friends that I can talk
Hmm.
to.
Hmm.
I also think it's important that if anybody is neurodivergent, that they find friends that are neurodivergent as well, because if you just have friends that are neurotypical, it's going to be challenging. They don't
Yeah.
understand the challenges that anybody with neurodivergency is going through.
Absolutely.
And for me, it involves a lot of patience.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I suppose that's it as well. It's one thing to hope others that I suppose can see you, but yeah, the work you've done on yourself must have been, well, a hell of a lot to learn to accept yourself, as you've said you struggled with, but also I suppose you will have little triggers, little red flags around your own behaviour as well. Now, can I ask you? Yeah, you talked about your childhood, quite isolated and what have you. So, as you're coming up to finishing high school, what was life like for you as you're going from one environment into another?
I had a very difficult time acclimating. I also, in that time had lost my grandfather. My grandfather had gotten cancer in his eye and died.
Hmm.
And that was very traumatic for me, because he was a great role model for me. But he
Yeah.
died when I was very young. So I
Hmm.
didn't really get to know him. And actually, all of my grandparents have died when I was very, very young. So I
Mm.
haven't had to experience that joy that a
Yeah.
lot of people get to experience.
Yeah. And so when you left school, did you go straight into work? Yeah, or into the workforce? Was there a gap? Did you go to college? How were things around that time?
I went straight to college after I
Hmm.
graduated, but
Hmm.
I was working. I
Yeah,
found some part-time jobs and I wanted to stay busy.
yeah, yeah. I mean, did this help with, like you said, the isolation you spoke of as a child, being both at college and in the workforce? Did this help with, I suppose, socialization or meeting a need in that respect?
It did, but it also exposed the layer that the workforce is very challenging.
Hmm.
I come to the workplace a little bit differently, and I
Yeah.
don't necessarily process things in 5 seconds as some other people might process things.
Hmm.
And the other thing that with my mind is I always try to think of, is there a better way of doing this?
Hmm.
And that can rub somebody in authority the wrong way, like I'm trying to overthrow them or
Hmm.
overexert my position, but really
Hmm.
I'm just trying to find a better way of doing things, a more economical way, a more cost savings way. But that's how
Hmm.
my mind works. I'm
Yeah.
I'm a solution guy. I've been selling my entire, not my entire adulthood, but that's what I love. I love
Hmm.
selling. When I was
Hmm.
in college, I sold Cutco cutlery. I sold $4 million worth of Cutco. And it
Wow.
wasn't by accident. It was because
Huh.
I'm not afraid to ask for the sale.
Hmm.
96% of people say no 6 times before they say yes.
Wow. No, well, that's an amazing gift in and of itself. No, that's so. I mean, can I just take it back? You mentioned, how people in authority might struggle. Do you have any examples of this, of how this played out for you?
Yeah, I do. I have a lot of examples. I think, one of the examples I can really think of was the former police chief of Shelburne, Aaron Noble, and
Hmm.
being in the DARE program and just trying to figure out a different way of teaching the DARE program to
Hmm.
adolescents. And I believe, and I want to preface this is just my thinking. I don't want to, there's no evidence to back that up, but that my thinking of how things could be differently caused an anger and rage in this individual that caused him to target me throughout my teens and 20s and even into my 30s until in 2022 when he received a $200,000 payout to from the town of Shelburne to just go away. Now, I don't want to misconstrue anything. I did break the law, but there were also things that I didn't do in Shelburne that I was blamed for. For example, he tried
Hmm.
to say that I tried to run him off the road. There was one time that they sent me a speeding ticket when no officer actually pulled me over. They just sent the ticket in the mail. So, corruption can occur anywhere. And that's what part of what I'm trying to expose is that corruption just doesn't occur in the corrupt city of Chicago. It can occur in a small town
Hmm.
in rural Vermont, which is
Hmm.
what exactly happened. No
Hmm.
question there was corruption. Now, I want to just say, I did break the law, so,
Hmm.
but I think I was unjustly targeted because I'm outspoken. And even today, Lee, when I speak, I am putting myself in a type of danger because I am exposing high levels of individuals in office.
Hmm.
But I
Wow.
believe that if we expose the truth will set us free.
So this is, I suppose, an example of, like you mentioned right at the start, moving to a small town where everybody knows you.
Mm-hmm.
So this Aaron, I suppose, marked you from a young age. You've pissed him off when you were a kid at this time. And so would you say that then clouded his judgment going forward? You were already pegged as a troublemaker, let's say.
I
Would that be a
was.
fair?
Yes. Yeah, questioning authority, trying to insert my opinion where it wasn't asked for.
Okay. Yeah, that would make sense. So, I mean, if I can ask you to sort of fast forward, so you took a job at a car dealership. I mean, how were things in the start? Yeah, in the lead up to the eventual incident that, took you out of there. How were things in the beginning?
I would say it was very rocky the entire time.
Okay.
What I learned from dealing with a car dealership is how manipulative people in the dealership are, how petty people are, how they will lie, cheat, and deceive just to get the next person. I mean, there's the way that the in the ideal world, if you have four salesmen, it should be, provided that all the salesmen are there, present at the dealership, there should be a round robin where everybody gets a chance to make a sale. But what I learned was that people would push other people out of the way
Okay.
because
So,
a lot of people are controlled by money and that's all they think about.
so you, as a relatively new entrant to the place, you would get elbowed out of the way by the more established guys.
Correct.
Oh, frustrating. So is this? Well, you said it was rocky from the start. Did this start to sow some resentment in you, or was this again another instance where you would stand up for yourself and say this is not right, but then in the same way meant, I suppose, cause antagonism with your colleagues?
I would stand up for myself and then it would create resentment in other salespeople. Like, who is he? He's, half of our age. He could be our son. So it created anger and resentment from other salespeople.
Okay, and so look, if we can go to the big event, let's call it. So,
Which big event? There were
all
there
right,
were a couple.
okay, all right. Well, if there's a couple, not the one that landed you in prison,
Well,
but if there's
there were two separate occasions that landed me in prison, Lee.
okay, all righty. Well, at the dealership, yeah. How can you talk me through from what you've said there, the experiences you felt with the other workforce, through to the point where you committed the crime that landed you in prison?
I think I touched on it, but I'll sort of expand that anger and resentment kept building
Yeah.
amongst the other salespeople, and I felt that I wanted to make a name for myself, and unfortunately, I didn't have the correct coping mechanisms to deal with that, and I took matters into my own hands to try to get a commission.
Okay. And so you can tell
And
us what were those matters that you? Oh, how?
I'm sorry, say that again?
So you said you took matters in your own hand. What
Right.
did that look like? Could you explain that for me?
Well, selling one of their cars to try to make a commission so that I could stand out amongst the other salespeople and I would get recognized and I would feel appreciated and I would feel loved.
And so, well, having read some of the book and what have you, you tried to sell a car that still belonged to the dealership.
Correct.
How did you structure that in a way that you felt at the time would serve you, but then obviously it was illegal in and of itself.
Well, I tried to sell it to another car dealership, so I was very easily caught. It was not a well thought out plan.
Yeah, so it
And
was just one of these. Yeah, sorry, please.
I feel like if I didn't do that, that I would have been stuck in a worse situation, quite frankly.
Okay. So you say you were very easily caught. So it was one of these impulsive and I suppose youthful as well. At a young age, we're not thinking several steps ahead. There is that, I suppose, that charge of youth. So how did it come about? How you were quickly found and the dominoes started falling. What did that look like for you?
I was quickly apprehended and arrested, brought to court. Judge
Hmm.
Jeffrey Crawford and Bob Wolford both decided that I didn't meet the criteria to go through the mental health court, despite
Hmm.
being autistic and on the Asperger's spectrum. And
Hmm.
instead, if I went through the mental health court, I may not have a record today, provided I didn't pick up additional charges in the meantime. But
Yeah.
instead, went through the traditional court and came out with a record.
Hmm. Okay. So
And
I
as
mean,
a result, I couldn't find a job. So in
yeah.
2009, I used somebody else's social security card and driver's license to pass a background check, did the work, but still it was wrong. And then in
Mm.
2016, I was indicted
Mm.
for money laundering and identity theft.
Okay. Right. I had it wrong. I thought you ended up in prison after selling the car
I
originally.
did. I did.
Right. Okay. So I mean, what did that look like? That stint in prison. I mean,
Well,
your
obviously it
thoughts and
didn't work
feelings. Mm.
because it didn't convince me that crime doesn't pay, and it
Mm.
should have.
Mm-hmm.
But I did the 18 months and came out, and like I said, I couldn't find a job.
Mm.
And I had gone to several of the churches that came to prison,
Mm-hmm.
got rebaptized, but
Mm.
that was not enough. That was not
Mm.
enough to give up the criminal behavior.
Okay. I mean, can I take it back then? So you were sentenced to 18 months in prison. What was going through your mind and what did it look like as you approached the prison building?
Scary, petrifying.
Yeah, I can imagine. And so what was it? You go through the gates, your initial booking and what have you. What was that like? Could you talk me through the process a little, please?
Well, being strip searched, being having no power, being controlled, go here, take a picture, fingerprints, all of that
Hmm.
showed me that I had no control. I was now a piece of property.
Hmm.
I had no rights. I had to do as I was told,
Hmm.
and I could no longer question authority.
And what level of prison were you in, given it being a first offence and your young age, and I suppose not violent crime or murder or something like that? What was the setup like?
Well, once I was done the 72-hour hold, which is typical, a new prisoner that comes in is left in booking for a 72-hour hold,
Hmm.
and then they are sent to a unit, and the unit, you're given, at this facility, which was St. Albans, I was given a cell, and I had a cellmate.
Hmm.
And the door would lock. So if there was a reason that the entire unit needed to be locked down, then, I was locked in a cell with another person.
Hmm. Okay.
And there was a
And
hole in the door so that they could
hmm.
pass the meal trays to us without
Okay.
actually having to unlock the door.
And were there any sort of, I don't know, programs, recreation, anything of that nature, or was it incredibly monotonous?
It was very monotonous. Now, we did an hour a day typically, unless there was a situation at the prison that determined that we could not go outside, but typically we were allowed outside to walk the rec yard for an hour or an hour and a half each day.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Additionally, different volunteers would come in, oftentimes for Bible study, and I would go to all of those.
Mm-hmm.
I had a Bible that I would read in my cell and pray with,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but I was not that Christian that I was when I was in federal prison in 2017 and 18. Not
Okay.
even close. So,
Mm.
in other words, I wasn't doing anywhere near the amount of work that I was doing in
Yeah.
2004.
Yeah. So, just as, again, because it's an overarching theme as well. You were raised Christian. Your faith remained, but it was, I suppose, not at the forefront of your life at this period. Would that be
I
a
was a
fair
lukewarm
description?
Christian. I was just
Yeah. Yeah.
going through the motions. I wasn't doing any of the work. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of people out there are lukewarm Christians. They want to engage with the world 6 days a week. And then they want to come to church on Sunday and ask God for forgiveness, but then go back to their old evil, sinful ways every other day of the week. And that's not how it works.
Mm.
Jesus even said, I would rather you be a cold Christian, than a lukewarm Christian. So you
Mm.
can't have your one foot in the water and one foot on land. You have
Mm.
to either be all in or not at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, this 18 months. Did you actually do 18 months, or were you given time off for
I think I
remissions?
was given a little bit of time for
Mm.
good time.
Mm.
I was not a. I did get some DRs for ridiculous. DRs are disciplinary reports for
Mm.
ridiculous reasons.
Mm.
But, in prison, a guard can give a DR for pretty much anything and just lie. And
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's a lot. The burden of evidence is a lot lower in prison than it is on the
Yeah.
outside.
Yeah. So at the end of that period, I mean, how how did you feel when you got out? I mean, other than relief at being free, but looking back over your time in prison, your state of mind when you walked out the doors, what were you like at that stage?
I was still pretty rebellious.
Mm-hmm.
I was grateful to be out, but
Yeah.
I didn't learn enough to not
Mm.
to quit violating the law. I mean, I'm
Mm.
going to call a spade a spade.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably my bigger question in that, yeah, you said earlier, though, you didn't learn the lessons, you weren't really rehabilitated. And so as you walk out the door, you'd not, I suppose, given it the deep thought and the, right, I'm never going back there, turn your life around kind of thinking that you must have done at a later stage. So, all right then, if I can add, well, you got out of prison, you're relieved to be out, not fully sorted, and you struggle to find a job. So what did life look like then? How were you filling your days?
I mean, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, trying to find work was the forefront of what I was trying to do, trying to make
yeah,
friends, and
yeah.
that was still. I mean, the challenges then are really no different than today. I mean,
Mm,
the challenges is just the difference today is I have the tools
yes.
to be able to deal with it that I didn't have back then. And some might say age. Age is certainly part
Mm,
of it, but also my love for Jesus and my dedication and my want to talk about my problems. I think back then I wouldn't talk about them. I would keep them inside and figure that the problems would be resolved, and they only exacerbated.
mm,
It's that if you think about it, it's like boiling water, and you have the pot, the cover on the pot. If
mm,
you don't turn the stove off when the water is boiling, it's just going to boil over, and that's what happened. Is that my issues, my anger, resentment, hate, it wasn't resolved properly, and it
yeah.
boiled over.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And did this then lead to like more petty crime? You mentioned you were speeding. You had these impulsive moments where you would, drive off without paying for petrol and things like that. Was that as a result of a lot of this? Or I said that's probably the wrong question because they would already exist. But did these escalate in view of this frustration that you were feeling at the time?
No question. Yes.
Okay. And one,
Because the issues were not resolved.
yeah. Yeah, so I suppose this frustration is building up to, I don't know, whatever higher level, added to the fact that you're struggling to find work and such like. I can imagine, maybe becoming quite an angry young man. Would that be a fair description?
I would say so.
Yeah. Well, I, well, again, the title of your book, there's a lot to unpack. And what we haven't talked about is your homosexuality. And now, at what age did you realize you were gay?
I've always known I was gay. I mean,
Hmm.
I was with guys very, very young. So
Yeah.
that's never been any
Hmm.
doubt in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I love myself. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, we live in an age where a lot of people just don't understand it. They think it's a choice.
Hmm.
Folks, it's not a choice. It's not like going to get a tattoo that is a choice. It's, for somebody that's straight and
Hmm.
attracted to women, they don't understand it. And
No.
that's fine. There's lots of things. Look, there's lots of things people do in life that I don't understand. But
Yeah.
I try to stay in my own lane and I don't worry about what other people think of me because what other people think of me is none of my business.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, when you were younger, I mean, would this be another example of something that kept you segregated from your peers?
No
Um,
question. Absolutely.
mm, mm.
Because I
And
was different.
yeah, yeah.
And, homosexuality was in the DSM-4 up until 1994 as a psychological disorder.
Mm, mm. So, at what point did you sort of come out? Now, you said you knew from a young age yourself that you were gay, um, but at what stage did you say this is me?
I mean, it's a small piece of me. I don't need the
Hmm.
world to know that I'm gay.
Yeah.
It's not how I define myself.
Hmm.
I define myself as a believer in God and a disciple of God. That's how I define myself.
Yeah. That's one where, because I noticed in the book you said struggling sometimes with lining up being gay with your faith at the time as well. I mean, how did that look for you?
It was a challenge because here
Hmm.
I am going to all these churches and they're trying to push their conversion therapy on me to try
Hmm.
to make me somebody that I'm not. And I'm just looking to be loved. I'm looking to be accepted. I'm looking for that missing piece. And what I've learned is I'm never going to get that from the outside world. I have to
Hmm.
do it. It has to be done internally. I have to accept
Yeah.
myself internally. And
Yeah.
then if other people don't want to accept me, then they're not really my friends and they don't care about me.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose that to me that sounds like a lot for anybody to deal with at any age, but for a young man who's, I suppose, struggling to find acceptance, find his way in the world, and grow up, that must have been a hell of a lot to deal with. And so I would ask, what were the impacts on you? I mean, your mental health couldn't have been particularly great at the time because, well, it's a struggle.
No, my mental health was not good at all. I was
Mm,
not getting the treatment that I needed. I would go to therapist and it would just be just something else that I didn't want to do. I wasn't there. I didn't want
mm,
to be there. I was forced by my parents to go there. And so,
mm.
just like with any help, the person who's getting the help has to want the help.
Yeah,
Otherwise, they're not going to learn anything. Look at it
yeah.
this way. If somebody doesn't admit that they have a drinking problem,
Hmm.
then they can't get help. So
Yeah.
forcing somebody or a family member or friend to go get help if they have a drinking problem isn't going to work unless that person admits that they have a drinking problem.
Yeah.
I can't have God unless I admit that my life is unmanageable, it's out of control. I need God. So I have to
Hmm.
get in alignment, just like a car.
Hmm.
If you drive a car, that car has to get in alignment with the manufacturer. That
Hmm.
it doesn't work the other way. It's the same way with my life. I have to get my life aligned with God. God doesn't get
Hmm.
his life aligned with me. That's not how it
Hmm.
works.
Yeah.
So there
Okay.
has to be a need, a want, and desire. I have to feel like my life is unmanageable without God. And that's the problem with all of the self-help organizations out there is
Hmm.
they falsely present this notion that anybody can solve their problems on their own. That is not
Hmm.
true. I can't do anything without God. Period.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. And so, all right, let's if we can fast forward. So you've got these. You're out in society. You're struggling to find a job, and I would say, yeah, by the sound of it, quite pissed off at the situation you found yourself in. Now, how how did you move forward with this? I mean, you mentioned you got into other criminal activities and things like that. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Well, like I said, I was using other people's information because I couldn't pass a background check to get jobs because I wanted to
Hmm.
work. That's always
Yeah.
been something I love doing, I'm passionate about, and I want to work. I want to earn a living and be a good, valuable citizen.
Hmm.
But unfortunately,
Okay.
the background checks are just so prolific that it makes it very, very challenging.
Yeah.
And I never knew, call it ignorance, that by breaking the law, it would cost. I mean, I know it now, but I didn't know it back in
Yeah.
2004. That
Hmm.
breaking the law would cause me such difficulty finding a job, finding
Hmm.
volunteer organizations, adopting a child, serving
Hmm.
on a jury. All of these issues would come into play.
Yeah. Alrighty. And so, well, I'm guessing that the using other people's identity didn't get you the jobs that you wanted. Now, that being in itself illegal, was it that got you arrested the next time and that you were sent to prison?
It was, yes.
Okay. How did it finally catch up with you?
Well, the president of the bank that I was using called the IRS to let them
Hmm.
know that there were checks being deposited into my account with other people's names on them.
Well, okay. So, well, were you then arrested at home and processed? How did that look?
8 officers showed up at my house, including Aaron Noble, John Schroeder from
Wow.
the IRS, and May Chow from the Secret Service, and
Wow.
arrested me. And my mother dropped on the floor, and thankfully she's alive today, but she could have
Hmm.
had a stroke. The
Hmm.
fact that I had an attorney and I had some indication that this might go down this way was shocking that they would go to
Hmm.
these extremes given that
Hmm.
this is a nonviolent offense and I have no history of
Yeah.
violence.
Yeah.
But it
Okay.
shows the corruption that
Hmm.
exists.
Yeah. All right. So you're arrested, you're processed. Can you talk me through, like the court and then to your next stint in prison, please?
Well, this is the final stint in prison, but
Hmm.
thankfully, and
Hmm.
there will never be another one. Praise Jesus for that.
Hmm.
But I was arraigned. My mother came to the hearing, and my mother's always come to my court hearings.
Hmm.
I was let out,
Hmm.
trying to find a job, and then I did find a job in about
Hmm.
November of 2016 it was at that time that John Schroeder and Michael Drescher, the now U.S. Attorney of Vermont, and who was the prosecutor on my case, decided they were going to add a condition onto my probation that said if I did find a job, I needed to tell the employer about the ramifications of hiring a convicted felon, which meant that I would never be able to find a job, which caused the next issue to occur where I found a job and I just decided to take matters into my own hands and pretend to be the employer and call the probation officer and tell her that I was made aware of that Melvin was a convicted felon, which was a lie. I was caught and then charged for lying to a probation officer. But I mean, I think it shows the history that oftentimes I'm in a corner and I don't know how else to get out of it, and I make the wrong decision impulsively. And it's just been a common problem throughout all of my life.
Okay. And so, I mean, as a systemic issue, what are your thoughts around that? I mean, as an outsider looking in, there's no question, you have broken the law, but like we touched upon, it's not been violent crimes and things like that, which, given as well the diagnoses that you have, would suggest to me that federal prison would have more of an adverse effect than the one that they were hoping for. Would that be a fair assessment?
No question.
And so, I mean, what other options are there available? I mean, forgive me because I'm not in the US, so I don't know, exactly what other programs, but what other steps could the court and or police have taken that you feel might have been, I suppose, ultimately more beneficial?
I think probation, community service would have helped. And I also want to share that I was actually volunteering at the Ronald McDonald House at the front desk before I was indicted by the grand jury in 2016. So I was volunteering, and as soon as that indictment came down, somebody from Ronald McDonald House found out about it, and then I was removed. So I was volunteering and loved it for over a year, and they loved me there. I was really passionate about it. I was enjoying it. And then all of a sudden I get this indictment and it's over. So it just never ceases to amaze me the lengths that these people go to. And my lawyer, who has been practicing for 30 years, has never seen the government go after somebody. There was no financial loss. I mean, were there victims? Yes. I used other people's information. However, I did the work. There was no loss from any of the victims. And he's never seen that. I mean, typically in any fraud case, there are losses by the victims. There was no victim impact statement at my sentencing. There were no losses. And the fact that the government went after me for such a little amount just shows the complete and utter destruction and corruption that occurs in this country.
I mean, do you think that's an example of just the government going in with a sledgehammer to a walnut approach, or do you feel it was local jurisdiction and you had a target on your back, as we spoke about earlier, or perhaps a culmination of the two?
I think it's a combination of the two. I mean, it was really edified when I tried to get off supervision and the local newspaper put a huge article in the paper with my picture. I mean, because I asked to get off supervision early. I mean, just the level of corruption that went on is just disgusting. This would, I believe, never occur in a major city, but because there's a low level of crime that occurs, these newspapers, politicians want to make a name for themselves. I mean, I know of sex offenders that didn't have their name in the paper, that there's very little to find about them. It's just really, really disturbing. And
Definitely.
I wrote this book because I don't want anybody to have to go through the torture and torment I went through.
Yeah. Well, if we can say, so you've been in court and you're being returned to prison now. So, I mean, did you have the same fear as you did in the first instance, or how did it differ, or was it similar on this occasion?
I think it was pretty similar,
Mm,
except this occasion I went to 10 different facilities in 18 months. I was
mm,
writing a lot of grievances. I was
mm,
journaling. I was writing my story because I wanted
mm,
to share it with the world. And I
mm,
put a target on my back because the guards knew what I was doing. And at one of the facilities, they actually confiscated my journal entries. They removed me from my solitary confinement cell,
mm.
stole my journal entries, and then I had to recreate them.
Wow. Wow. It's one of those. I want to say I'm shocked, but sadly, experience tells me, that yeah, this would happen on a regular basis. So again, if I can bring it forward now, the excerpt of your book that's available online talks of an incident, an incredibly harrowing incident. So was this the first facility that you went to, or was this at a later stage? And how did things build up to that point?
It was a later stage facility. I
Hmm.
think what built up was constantly writing grievances, getting targeted because I was writing grievances, being pulled out of my cell, brought I was not given my medication and
Mm,
brought to the attorney client room, four guards including the superintendent with their cameras on there asking me what my end game was to writing all these grievances and
mm.
them asserting this false narrative that I was writing these to get out of jail for free. Now,
Right.
there's only one way to get out of jail, and that's in a body bag. People don't get out
Mm,
of jail for free unless they get, well, I should say for two reasons. One, they get a clemency from the governor or the president, or they go out in a body bag. Those are the only
mm,
two ways of
mm,
getting out of jail, period.
mm,
No other way. I mean, I
mm,
could write 100,000 grievances and I'm not going to get out of jail. But
mm,
when you write grievances, it puts a target on your back because
mm,
you're exposing to the Bureau of Prisons the corruption that's going on. And,
mm,
prison life, prison guards, they want all the prisoners to shut their mouth, remain quiet, and not expose any of the corruption. No
mm.
different than on the outside world.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas I suppose, yeah, there's different rules at play once you're behind those walls.
Right.
And one question I'd ask, again, the excerpts that I spoke of before were, well, let's know two ways. When you were raped in prison, and I don't want to gloss over that, but one thing that stuck out in my mind also, you mentioned there were no guards walking past for a significant period of time
Right.
that would allow this to happen. I mean, was that another example of, you know, ignoring Melvin the troublemaker or whatever they would see you as?
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think that if I wasn't writing the grievances, calling attention to the misconduct, that they
Hmm.
probably would have paid more attention. But again,
Yeah.
these people saw me as a troublemaker,
Hmm.
trying to draw attention to myself, instead of seeing it for what it is, that it's an individual that's trying to call attention to what's going on and will
Hmm.
not be ignored.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, yeah, in the aftermath of this attack on you, a- again, we know the prison rules of you don't snitch on others and what have you. Was this something you had to go through and suffer in silence, for want of a better phrase, or were there actions taken around this?
There were no actions taken. I had to suffer in silence a lot of the time. And because I
Hmm.
was raising attention in the grievance process, I was oftentimes put in solitary confinement.
Wow. That's a lot. I mean, I can't even, yeah, I can't even imagine how that must have felt. And so, without wishing to gloss over that period in time, you got to the end of your sentence. So, how were things toward the end and then towards eventual freedom?
When I finally moved from being in prison to the halfway house, that was a horrible experience too, because I was at the halfway house for such a short period of time. And for those of your viewers who don't understand, before in a federal case, before an individual can go from prison to their homes, they have to go through a halfway house. And a halfway house, in simplistic terms, is a house that's in a community that the prisoners can't leave.
Yeah.
They can escape, but then it's viewed as the same way as escaping from a federal prison. So it's actually a smaller. You're actually confined to an even smaller space, and it was bunkhouses, and it was very challenging because it was a dormitory style, and I really didn't have any space, or they had a little yard that I could walk around, but it was very confining. And because I was there for such a short period of time, the director felt that I wouldn't allow me to go look for work. She wouldn't allow me to look for volunteer opportunities, and I was only allowed to go to church for an hour a week.
Wow. So, while you might not be in the big house, as it were, you still got massive constraints about your movements and what your life looks like.
Right.
Okay, so I mean, when you exited the halfway house situation, what was life like then? Was it a repeat of before? I mean, what was your mindset at this point?
My mindset was I was under supervision at that point, because of my mental health diagnosis. I had to go see a psychiatrist once a week. His name was Dr. Craig Lipstag. And throughout almost all of my supervision, I saw this individual. And, it was very, very challenging to be out on supervision, because at any time they could violate me. And the supervisor, the probation supervisor, had actually changed. It was no longer Parrish Gibson, who was very, very difficult to deal with. And she was my supervisor before I got, between when I got locked up, between when the government indicted me in 2016 to when I called her and tried to pretend to be the employer.
Okay. So, well, as far as you've got a new supervisor, and you were still looking for work and volunteering opportunities, would that be? And what? I don't know. Was there any change, or was it just the same as before?
Well, I think I had this epiphany, and I had actually had a near-death experience before I went to federal prison, where I was driving on 495 in the middle lane going 72 miles an hour when a Lexus SUV came down an embankment and literally crossed in front of my car. And that was the epiphany that I needed to stop stealing, lying, cheating, being dishonest, and I needed to give my life to God. And so I was a completely different person. Even in my experience in the federal prison, I was going to all the Bible studies. I was reading my Bible. I was praying. So when I was in solitary confinement, I was reading my Bible. I was educating myself. I was going to every single Bible study that came in, or every single Bible study that was available. And I was taught, I learned about the cults, Christian Science, Scientology, Jehovah's Witness, so that I could witness to other people when I got out. So I was a completely different person, really.
So, on the face of it, would you say, even though your time in prison on this occasion was harsher, given the work that you were doing and the faith you have, etc., you came out a stronger person overall? Would that be a
No
fair
question.
assessment?
No
Mm.
question. The
Okay.
church I go to today, the
Hmm.
the volunteer that came in, I actually met him.
Mm.
That's why I decided to go to that church.
Okay. No, lovely. So, with that in mind, then, how did this change things for you and your approach to reintegrating in society?
Well, my approach is that I was a broken person. I
Mm.
admitted that I wasn't perfect. I didn't
Mm.
try to live up to other people's expectations.
Mm.
And I learned to love myself
Yeah.
and not try to look for validation from the outside world.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
And then accepting that I needed God in my life.
Mm.
Before, I was a lukewarm Christian. I was
Mm.
not doing the work that I needed to do. I was still being dishonest and lying and cheating to try to get what I wanted in life. And
Mm.
I was
Yeah.
manipulating people. That's what I was
Yeah.
doing. I was
Yeah.
using people for my own benefit.
Mm. So then you've come out of prison. Well, I suppose, let's say you're full on Christian. So this impetus, this force of life or what have you, is that what took you into the political realm?
Yes, my frustration with the politics caused me to want to volunteer for Trump in 2016. And it was an
Hmm.
amazing experience.
Okay. Well, can I ask more about that then? I mean, I've looked at the photo gallery. There's pictures with famous people, with regular people, just coming together in a political sphere. So, yeah, how did that impact upon you?
I saw so much corruption in the system. I wanted to
Mm.
see change made.
Mm.
And that's why I
Okay.
got involved.
Hmm.
Because if we want to see change made, we can't just simply sit on the sidelines and expect things are going to change. The definition of
Yeah.
insanity is doing the same thing repeatedly and expecting different results.
Yeah. So, I mean, what was your role? Were you campaigning? Were you fundraising?
I was
What?
campaigning. I was out on the front lines, knocking doors, talking to
Mm-hmm.
people. My favorite people to talk to were Hillary supporters because she's so corrupt. She
Yeah.
smashed 13 cell phones. She doesn't
Mm.
care.
Mm.
She's so protected, though.
So,
And the judicial system isn't fair. The
mm.
rules for the rich and the powerful are very different from everybody else.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, and well, I would agree. And as an outsider looking across, I mean, we're given very skewed political reporting. I mean, from where I am in New Zealand, you look at the American political climate, it feels very polarized. And I suppose this division is really hyped up on either side. Is that what it's like living in it?
I think it's only hyped up on one side, and that's the left
Mm.
side. I think the left side is very, very violent. They try
Mm.
to push their agenda on everybody else, and if they don't get their way, they resort to violence.
Mm. I mean, were you subject to any of that?
No, I was
No.
not.
Yeah, no, I
But I
do ask
mean,
because sorry, go.
I will say when I was volunteering for Trump in 2016,
Mm.
I had, and I don't think I have a photo of this, but I had my newspaper that said acquitted with Trump, um, and somebody from one of the news organizations called the police and said I was trying to incite some kind of violence, and I was removed from the Trump campaign as a result. So I've seen the lengths that the left will go to
Mm.
ruin somebody.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, as well, I suppose President Trump is quite a polarizing character, so I no doubt see that people would get quite up there. Did I mean were you ever around any of these kind of acts? Or, you've alluded to violence on the left and what have you. what if you could give us have you any examples of events like that that you've seen? Were you privy to any of that?
I've seen where the lefties will go to unsolicited apartments and
Mm.
lie to them and claim that they forgot their key just to get in. I've seen them go through doors and windows that may be ajar.
Mm.
The left will do by any means necessary.
Mm. Wow.
And
Yeah, I get it.
they've
Like,
done that all from Saul Alinsky. Saul Alinsky was the guy who started all of this.
mm. Yeah, I've only read a bit of his stuff, but yeah, that a lot of it does track, and I do see quite a lot of. I mean, like say, by any means necessary has often been used. Malcolm X's statement and what have you to justify certain behaviours. So, well, if I can bring it forward, you campaigned for Trump and Pence back in 2016. Were you campaigning again for the latest presidential run?
I wasn't. I mean, I was in a way, but I wasn't as involved. And
Mm.
the short answer to that is they weren't offering expenses at that time. When I
Hmm.
volunteered in 2016, I live in Vermont, and I was campaigning in New Hampshire, and they had a much stronger field team at that time.
Mm.
They didn't need to pay for expenses like they did. They weren't offering to pay for expenses like they were in 2016.
Mm. Okay, okay. So, well, I suppose in order to bring this one home, like I said, there's your story is fascinating. There's a lot to unpack. If I can ask you to sort of boil it down, can you give us, well, your biggest learnings, not least the fact that you've learnt to love yourself, but what would you like people to take away from the conversation we've had, from the book that you've written?
That we all have our own challenges and struggles.
Hmm.
It's how we deal with them, how we cope with them, and that isolating and not talking about it is won't help anybody, and it's self-sabotaging.
Mm.
When I started doing men's work in 2022, that's really when I started surrounding myself with other men, realizing other men are broken, and we
Hmm.
all have our own challenges, and I needed to talk about it. I needed to find friends that would love me, and I could love, and
Hmm.
really start to build that foundation. If we have a strong foundation, then when chaos and anxiety and other challenges come into life, it's harder to blow over that foundation. But if the
Mm.
foundation isn't strong, it's not gonna withstand the challenges that come into life.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful, beautiful. So, all right, well, what's next for you, Matt? What's next on the horizon?
I would love to be a public speaker, go out
Mm.
and talk to people about my story and share
Hmm.
my story because it's really
Mm.
powerful.
Definitely. Yeah. No, that's definitely. Okay, well,
So if your
thank.
viewers know anybody or want me to come talk to them, email me, bulliedbehindbars@gmail.com. My book is
Mm-hmm.
available on Amazon. You can
Mm-hmm.
follow me on IG, Instagram, Bullied
Mm-hmm.
Behind Bars, X Bars Bullied, and Facebook, Matthew.Melvin.5621.
I shall put all of this in the show notes, all the links, and I will push that around on the socials and what have you. But thank you. I really do appreciate hearing your story. It has been very edifying to speak with you, and I've got to say, even though there have been some difficult times, really uplifting. I think your strength and what have you is incredibly admirable. So thank you. Thank you for speaking with me.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
An absolute pleasure, my friend. And thank you out there for listening. As always, I appreciate your support. If you can please look out for me on Instagram and TikTok under Social Harmony Talk, and on Facebook under Social Harmony Time to Talk. I'll post show links, selfies, information on new episodes, things like that, where I will launch a new episode on Spotify and Apple Podcasts every Monday at 6 p.m. New Zealand time. If I can ask you to follow me across those platforms, I would really appreciate it. Brings me to the forefront, gets me more and more guests that I know you love to hear. If you're in the area, you'd like to chat as well, please sing out, get in touch. We can discuss a future episode together. But for now, go well, look after yourselves, and keep talking. Thank you very much for listening.